now.
All right.
Is mine on?
Everybody ready?
Yeah,
Yes,
I see the red.
Okay.
looks like.
You're fine. We're good. Thank you. I call to order this regular business meeting of the Stillwater Area Public Schools Board of Education on March 19th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Actually, we're at about 6:10 right now. Sherry, could we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Stivland,
Here?
Vice Chair Pearson,
Here.
Treasurer Riley,
Here.
Clerk Potacek,
Here?
Director Burns,
Here.
Director Pelletier,
Here.
Director Weisberg.
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Thank you. And a second?
I would like to remove one item from the agenda. And if I can get a second on that, I would like to remove action item 6F from the agenda titled Administrative Leave. And if I could just get a second, I can explain my rationale.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have two major concerns with this agenda item. The first concern, I believe that this is potentially another open meeting law violation. Chair Stivland, as you remember, you would probably recall, I did express this concern to you. Minnesota Statute 13D.05, Subdivision 2, states reasons why a meeting must be closed. Among other reasons, it states that a meeting must be closed for preliminary consideration of allegations or charges, but the meeting must be open at employees' request. To my knowledge, no such meeting has occurred, making this precipitous, inappropriate, and possibly in violation of statute. So not only is this of grave concern to me, I don't want any part of this in the event that it is, for the reasons just stated. And I'm wondering where the supporting documentation is, where's the proof, is there proof, and what in specific are we to be voting on? The second reason of concern to me, and no doubt much more importantly, is timing. To state the obvious, we are in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. As a planning commissioner in Lake Elmo some years back, our planning director at the time asked us on a regular basis if the decisions we were making negatively affect the health, safety, and wellness of our community. Or do they protect it? I try to live by that every day. We are living in the worst health crisis in 100 years. Putting employee A on leave is not only in possible violation per the above statute, it is reckless, dangerous, and as two different people have stated in recent emails to us, it is egregious. We cannot and must not willingly put the health, safety, and welfare of our students and families at risk by placing priority on a reckless, poorly developed crusade. The time is not now to do this.
Thank you. Did you have a comment?
Not on that, but I would like to, I have some concerns myself with this agenda item, if I may.
Okay.
So in looking at Minnesota Statute 13D.05, and Director Pelletier made mention of this, I have concerns about this action item at this open meeting. Subdivision 2B of 13D.05 appears to me to require a closed meeting for this type of agenda item, unless, of course, the employee elects to have it open. My concern here is that this board, if we choose to have this agenda item and we move forward with it, we may be acting potentially in violation of that statute and could open us up to a liability. What I would really like to see before we have this agenda item, before we act on this agenda item, is one, if not two, written opinions from counsel. It's possible that, Board Chair Stivland, you've had conversations with legal counsel on this topic, but I think this is a sensitive enough issue that we need to have. This is very important for us to have written opinion from counsel telling us that, basically clearing that this type of a meeting is appropriate, that we are not in any way even coming close to a violation of 13D05. I know in my practice that when we have clients who have questions about whether or not they could in the future be in violation of something, they come to us and ask for a written opinion. And in effect, it's their insurance policy against an allegation that the actor went ahead willfully, went ahead without taking precaution. And we don't have that here. We don't have, at least I haven't seen written opinion from council that clears us, and I'm very concerned. So we have, as public officials, we have immunity from if we make an honest mistake, we have immunity from that. However, if we charge ahead and we don't take proper precaution, we can potentially lose that immunity, and that could be very serious for us. That we could potentially, if legal action is brought against us, and it is demonstrated that we didn't take every possible precaution, it could be argued that that we have been not just negligent, but we have been intentional in our action. So my point here is that I don't want to risk that, and I believe it's very important that we take every possible precaution before we take this action.
Okay, I just want to make something really clear. The statute that both of you have referenced does not apply in this situation. No complaint has been filed of any kind, and that statute references how we handle a complaint of an employee, okay? I just want to make that clear. That's what that statute is referencing. That is not the case here.
Well, I want to hear
Also,
that from
I want to
council.
say-
I want to hear that from council.
Okay, my second concern is if you had that concern and you wanted to bring that forward, you could have brought that forward any time in the past month.
And I
okay?
did, and I did write that to you.
I'm just hearing about it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's upsetting and kind of ridiculous to me.
I wrote it to you, Chair Stivlin. I wrote my concern to you, and I can reference that.
Not this concern, you did
Yes.
not. And so to reference this statute is completely inappropriate in this situation, okay? It does not apply. And the third point I would like to say in response to both of these concerns is that I have been working very closely with our legal counsel to assure that everything is being done exactly the way it should be done. And everything in this, in this action item is appropriate and legal and completely within our rights to pursue as a board.
With all due respect, though, Chair Stivlin, I would like to see that myself.
That is perfectly fine, but it's
yeah.
an action item on the table tonight. And so
Right.
if you wanted to see that in writing, you should have given us time to get that before tonight.
And like I say, I did ask that we have specific counsel, that we have specific instructions from our counsel, and that was not responded to. So I feel it's very important that we take the precaution now. I really do. And what is the harm in waiting? If this, I'm not saying that it goes away forever.
When did you ask the question? I never saw an email that said.
I spoke directly I emailed directly with Board Chair Stivlin.
I'm sorry, I do not recall that email.
Okay.
I will go back and check to verify. I do not recall that.
Chair Stivlin, I just wanted to read out loud then the email that I sent to you March 16th. Dear Sarah, as a member of the board and a potential defendant in a lawsuit,
You know
which
what? This
could
is
very
not-
well.
I'm gonna ask
You're
you
not going to gavel me when you say you didn't have the information from me because you did, because I emailed you on Monday. So don't make those accusations, Sarah, because they're lies. I emailed you on Monday,
ask
so if
you-
you're going to say a lie, I will combat that all day long.
I will ask you to be quiet, please. This is
Don't
not-
say things that are untrue.
This is not the time or the place to raise this concern in this way. It just isn't.
When you ignore it, it is.
Does anybody else have a question or concern regarding this situation before we vote?
I just wanted to say that when I heard the statute, I thought, when when you said it concerned allegations. No allegations have been made. So I understand that we have had discussions with legal, and this was the recommended course of action, that we are doing an investigation first so that we have the facts. Period.
When did we have discussions with
further?
legal? When did we have discussions with legal? You just said that.
She just said she's been
I've been
in
working very
contact with
closely with
legal.
legal for over a month on this, at least 2 months.
What is the harm in getting a written statement from two attorneys?
The harm is that the action item is on the agenda tonight, and no one asked me for this before now. So if you want.
I said I'm concerned about a lawsuit.
We can take it to a
You
vote.
didn't ask. Let's vote.
Okay, we need to have a vote whether or not we're going to remove this item from the agenda tonight.
Can I just ask a question first? Director Burns, when you read or referenced 4B, it does say allegations or charges, and there, to my knowledge, aren't any at this point. What's your response to that?
It says that a public body shall close one or more meetings for preliminary consideration of allegations. Doesn't mean that there are allegations. It's consideration of allegations.
Preliminary
Consideration
consideration of an actual allegation.
Which
There are no
not.
allegations in this case.
Well, I could read it to say that you are considering bringing allegations.
No,
No.
that would
an
be
invest-
inappropriate.
I'd
We're
like to,
having an
all I
investigation.
want to have is an explanation from our attorney, okay? Because what I do not want to do is have a mistake be made where we go forward and it's proven that we were wrong. That's my only concern. And I did ask to get specific advice from our counsel on this point.
It is my understanding that you have talked to our council multiple times, and so if you had had that question, you could have asked them directly.
I
yourself.
haven't in the last 6
Well,
weeks.
that certainly was within your rights. So this is a really inappropriate time to be bringing this up right now.
Not at all. It's on, this is the first chance that we've had.
No, it's
It
been
was
on
brought
the
up.
agenda for a month.
Okay,
No, it hasn't, actually.
It was on the last meeting agenda and it got moved.
It was not on the agenda.
Director Potacek,
Well, and again, I think if I understand correctly, what you're asking is this to be removed as an agenda item.
Correct.
And again, what our chair has said is this is not punitive. There are no allegations against that individual.
And that may or may not be true.
that is true.
Okay, I don't know
Fact,
whether
that is true.
well, I don't know what constitutes allegations is a
An
question.
actual complaint
That's what
filed.
you say.
Then why
So-
is it on here? Honestly, why is it on here?
Well, the point is, as a discussion item, when we get down to it, that's when the chair, who is, if she's at fault here, or there's a shortcoming, she's taking a big risk.
We
Well,
all are.
if
We all
if
are.
Okay,
Correct. But she's asked to present that case when that item comes up, if it comes up. That's what's before the board, is whether or not this remains as an agenda item.
Correct.
it is very clear that you disagree with the item, and I assume that when we get to that item, you'll be able to share your reasons why, again, of your disagreement, and then you can vote no if you disagree.
It isn't the disagreement with the item, it's the concern of voting on the item. That's my concern.
Okay, if you seriously had a concern, it should have been raised before now, so that something could have been done to allay that concern.
Well,
have been working
I made the
closely
motion.
with Council.
I'm sorry, I made the motion and I did express
Second.
concern.
Let's vote. Should we remove item F?
Please be
from-
careful of how you vote.
Should we remove item F from the agenda? All in favor, say aye. We're removing item F from the agenda.
Aye.
Raise your hand, you're removing item F from the agenda.
Aye.
All against? Nay?
Nay.
The vote is 4-3. The item stays on the agenda. Moving on, let's go to the consent agenda.
I think did we approve the agenda then? Was-
Oh,
Yes, we'll vote on the rest,
so,
on the agenda, period.
right, sorry. Can we have a vote on the agenda as it stands?
So you need a second yet.
I'll second.
A motion by member Potacek, you'll need a second.
Thank you, I need a second for the
second.
motion
I'll
to approve the
second. Director
agenda.
Riley.
Director Riley approves, or seconds the motion to approve the agenda. All in favor, raise your right hand. Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on, we have the consent agenda. We have item A, minutes of March 5th. Item B, minutes of March 5th, closed session. Item C, the disbursement register from March 7th to March 20th. Item D, accepting gifts and donations. And item E, human resources personnel report. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Director Pearson moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Director Weisberg seconds. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moving on to reports. Item A is the 2020 district-wide pavement rehabilitation projects. And for that, we will go to Ms. Hoheisel.
Thank you. Chair Stivlin, Superintendent Pontrelli, school board members. As a report item tonight, you have responses to bids for the 2020 district-wide pavement rehabilitation that will take place. They are at the sites of Stillwater Area High School, Stillwater Middle School, and 2 areas of Rutherford Elementary. This is part of our long-term facility maintenance that was approved last summer as an overarching lump sum amount in a list that you were provided. We estimated that the project would come in at approximately $854,000. Bids came in quite favorable at $591,000. And so I'm just going to open it up for questions at this time. This will be an action item at your April meeting. Any questions?
Does anybody have any questions regarding the pavement projects for this year?
So just highlighting, it's several $100,000 lower than anticipated, which is great news.
It is. It is.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. We'll
Thank
have
you.
this as an action item at our next meeting. All right, before we begin our next report, I just have a couple things I would like to take a moment to acknowledge. The profound circumstances we are now experiencing together. 1 week ago, the COVID-19 virus felt like a faraway problem. Just 4 days ago, the governor announced that all schools would close for 2 weeks to allow teachers to prepare for an entirely new way of delivering instruction. Folks, this is not a snow day. Yesterday, Governor Walz told us this is not a blizzard, this is winter. Today's Star Tribune headline read, 18-month virus siege. We are at the beginning stages of something that's going to affect our lives for a very long time to come. And this has truly presented us with a challenge unlike anything else we've ever faced before. I believe that I can speak on behalf of the entire board in saying thank you to all of our teachers, our principals, our janitors, our cafeteria staff, our secretaries, our technology leaders, our administration, and our families for working so hard to prepare this massive shift for our students. If we plan for the worst, we can hope for the best. And we can help each other get through this together. And to our students, I apologize. We know this is all really strange, maybe boring, maybe stressful, maybe annoying, but please know that by staying home and away from other people, you are actually saving hundreds or maybe thousands of lives. It is not always going to be fun or easy, but it is really, really important. So I want to thank you, students, for doing your best with all of this craziness. I know it's not going to be easy for you. And so, we've added to tonight's agenda our very first COVID-19 report. And this will remain a standing report on our agenda until sometime in the future when it is no longer needed. An enormous coordinated effort has been happening in our district over the past 4 days, including a personal phone call to every single family in the district to check in, answer questions, and just connect. Of course, this topic will be front and center for quite a while, but I want to assure the community that the regular work of the district will continue on. And so with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Pontrelli to give us a report on how things have been going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We recognize that this has been a difficult time for our students, staff, and community. We all long for the comfort and security of our regular routines, and we miss the people, our friends, classmates, and colleagues that we're used to seeing every day. As you know, everything changed for us last week when Governor Walz made the decision to shut down all Minnesota schools from March 18th to the 27th to slow the spread of COVID-19. Prior to that, we'd already made the decision to extend Stillwater's spring break into Monday and Tuesday of this week due to concerns about students, families, and staff who had been traveling all around the world. The Governor and Department of Education have been very clear in establishing guidelines for school districts in participation with the Minnesota Department of Health, the CDC, and the World Health Organization. Our purpose is to ensure that every student in the state of Minnesota receives an equitable education and has equal access to learning and instruction during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our charge is to develop plans for the following: distance learning, care for children of families of emergency workers, nutrition, meals and/or instructional materials pickup, health and wellness, mental health support resources for our students, attendance and truancy policies, special education services, service for our English learners, students experiencing homeless or housing instability need to be taken care of. We need to look at early learning, assessment, before and after school childcare, how we communicate with our families and staff, tribal considerations, broadband access for all of our families, access to libraries, activities and athletics, staff safety and roles and responsibilities, funding for all of these things, and then the employment and workforce needs of our staff. If you're interested in learning more about the specifics of these plans, you can visit the Minnesota Department of Education website, where they clearly lay out the expectations under each of these areas. For the past several days, we've been working collaboratively with neighboring school districts and Education Commissioner Mary Catherine Rickard to develop our plans and procedures. Our top 3 priorities are: develop systems to support and provide food service for our students, provide childcare for our emergency workers and our educators, create a distance learning program that effectively meets the needs of all of our students. There are many logistical details around all of this, and the district's website is the best place to go for the most up-to-date information. Information really does change minute by minute during this time. District leaders have done an incredible job the last few days pulling off the monumental task of organizing food distribution and childcare, both which began yesterday. We're currently providing childcare for dozens of emergency workers each day at our 4 locations in the district. And we're ensuring the environments are clean and sanitized and that good social distancing practices are in place. In just 2 days, we've also provided 798 grab-a-go meals at our 13 distribution sites. So today we're up over 1,400 meals. Our district educators have done an amazing job developing a distance learning platform for our teachers to use. Our emphasis for the next 10 days is to focus on creating lessons and delivering learning experiences to our students. And I want to thank the people around the table today at the board meeting and all of those educators who worked so hard this week. They really gave it their all, and there wasn't any complaining. People were coming to the table to decide how to best deliver for our students. It's really been amazing. Our staff and our team here at the table has done an amazing job. Many people might wonder what this might look like in operation right now. We brought more than 1,000 staff back on Wednesday, and principals met with individual building teams to begin developing their distance learning. These meetings took place using technology to allow staff to isolate themselves in their classrooms and participate in the meetings electronically. Our teachers are calling all of their students to say hello, check in, and identify any needs they may have, whether it's technology, food, or social, emotional, mental health needs. Our teachers have contacted this afternoon over 4,000 families, so in less than 2 days, a day and a half, that's pretty amazing. We have a team following up on the more than 800 individual needs that they've identified so far through these calls. Our paraprofessionals and community education assistants are manning our emergency childcare sites. Our transportation department is not only responsible for transporting kids to childcare, but also delivering materials and food items to various sites across the district. We are leveraging partnerships with groups like Valley Outreach to ensure consistency with food access for families. We've also begun to implement processes to support our staff as they work remotely in the coming days to plan for distance learning or manage our district operations. We don't know yet what will happen beyond March 27th. We expect the governor will be giving us more information to understand and develop next steps depending on our current reality in the next few days. We do know that this is an incredibly fluid situation, and every day our needs change, sometimes minute by minute. We do know that a future need is the ability for us to quickly access and procure materials for students and staff. You'll see we've included the emergency COVID-19 release of funds agenda item for later this evening. There are many emergency items that we haven't included in our budget. We'll need to purchase additional technology, software, and improve phone systems to support distance learning and working remotely. And we'll need more cleaning supplies and protective gear. These are just a few of the examples of our needs. This is a new experience for all of us, and as a school district, we're doing everything in our power to create systems to support our community of learners, even though they aren't physically with us inside our school walls. Today, I participated in a phone call with our state representatives and senators to discuss responses from Washington County, Lakeview Hospital, the Greater Stillwater Area Chamber of Commerce, and the school district. We appreciate the opportunity to partner with our government leaders and our community organizations as we continue to address the needs of our students and families in the coming days, and we'll commit to doing so for the duration of this pandemic.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions or additional comments about this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank you, Denise, and Sarah said it well, but I want to just mimic that. Thank you so much for your leadership. I think we've all received some really positive emails from staff, and you know, as a mother, and you know, more importantly as a mother, the care that you're putting into our students, you're putting our students first, our families first. You're right where you're supposed to be, and I guess I just want to thank you and you know, kind of ask, you know, how can we support you? How can we support the work that you need to do? How can we make it easier on you?
Well, I think one of the things is we're bringing forward and had the conversation with the chair and vice chair about the technology needs. Our staff haven't en masse been doing distance learning, and so the technology, the phone system so they can access and use their cell phones and other devices to be able to connect with students is really important. As we go down the road, you know, we have things and feel really good about where we are today, but the pandemic is just beginning in Minnesota, right? And so you know that as our healthcare systems become more stressed and our families need more things, we'll be ramping up the need for more childcare probably, and food services. And we also have to think of our staff, because as much as we are trying to practice social distancing and have people work from home if they're able to, people will be getting sick. And so how are we going to provide the services that our families are used to when it's a daily education that we're required to? We're going to have some conversations about that. That's going to be a challenge for every school district who's facing this.
Mm-hmm. Director Weisberg?
Yeah, when you mentioned needing more cleaning supplies and protective gear, is that specifically for the childcare areas? And do we have enough right now, or is that something that?
That bottle of sanitizer goes everywhere with us.
Yeah.
We don't have enough. We have wipes, many of the teachers have volunteered some of the supplies that came into their rooms for wipes and sanitizer, but we don't have enough for our current childcare. We don't have masks. If we would get to the point where we need more protective gear, we don't have that. And my understanding is that on the call that I was on this afternoon with Lakeview Hospital, they only have 4 masks per employee, and so it's not, they're in, we need more of them, so.
Yeah, two questions, if I may, on that. Number one, if we have especially a large listening audience tonight, are there certain kinds of surgical masks they wear? And why I say that is because I usually wear a mask when I go out and fertilize. And I'm sure a lot of people out there may have those sorts of things around. And so it might behoove if there was a need, people might come forward who have some. I, for example, probably have 3 of those, but they're not particularly sophisticated in my garage. But if there's a bigger need, and obviously there is, I would be more than happy to drop that off. Now, maybe they can't take that sort of thing, I don't know.
I don't know anything about masks for the,
Okay, or
we'd have to
surgical.
check with Paula McDonald is our health specialist. She'd be able to tell us what's appropriate. I'm sure she knows, I just don't know off the top of my head. Some of you with medical backgrounds probably do.
And then one other unrelated question, but a question, I've been told that the governor in his speech to educators and some of his earlier talks said there would be no layoffs as part of this. Is that true? Am I paraphrasing that correctly?
That is true for us right now. I think that's one of the things that many organizations are struggling with, but the thought is that we want to keep everybody on board and are hopeful that we'll be back into our classrooms in the future and trying to support families through this. So that is where it is right now. I don't know, long-term, how long all of that will be in place, but he's really, I think, trying to do a good job of helping support people through this, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there is an easy way that you could keep us better informed of what you're seeing, what the challenges are, what's happening, so that we know, so that when decisions do come to us, we kind of know what's going on and what you're finding. I know you're doing a ton, but if there's a way that you could just give us updates of what's happening, that would be great.
Yeah, well, we have our Friday updates, and then we have our Wednesday updates with you. So I think and then things will be changing over the weekend. So certainly, we got the call Sunday morning, and we've been in full gear trying to pull everything together up to we have a command center also, just like Lakeview, just like Washington County, and Bob has lived there nonstop since Wednesday, making sure that all these things are pulled together. But we will do our best. And I think maybe one of the things that's helpful for us is if you have questions or concerns, to share that with Chair Stivlin, and then she can connect with me, with Sherry, with Carissa, because we're trying to crank out a number of things for our students and families. So we're happy to do that. We just are in full nose to the grindstone right now.
Yeah, and just to say, I think because public is listening, if there are people out there in the community that hear things or notice things that would be helpful or make observations of things that are going on that you want to let us know about, also send those our way, and we'll try to make, do what we can to, try to get through this together, I guess, right?
One of the other things that we were asked is just how can we help? And so we have a email on the community education site, because we've had people ask about delivering meals, donating money for meals, all kinds of things. And so at the time, right now, we don't know what that need's going to be. It's just starting. So if people in the community are interested in that, they can go online and share what they might be interested in helping with or doing.
Remind me, what is that email again?
Yeah, it's community ed. It's
Stillwater ComEd, all one word,
2 M's on com, right?
.org? Or at Stillwater Schools, so stillwatercomed@stillwaterschools.org.
Right.
And there's a link on our homepage as well.
Oh, good. So you can just go to the website and look at it. Yeah. Great. And Director Burns.
Thank you. So I know that this situation is changing by the day, but you mentioned that you're working on potential distance learning options. I'm sure that you've received questions, but we've received questions too, and I'm sure the listening audience is wondering, if it turns out that we're going to need to have distance learning, when do you think, would you expect that you would have information for families?
I think we'll, and Bob can elaborate some more on this too, but I think we'll know by next week. And I would be willing to bet that come March 30th, we will be in full distance learning model. I'm fairly certain of that. We've been given lots of indications from at the state level and others that that will happen. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's probably accurate. Right now, the way that, where our principals are at, I'm anticipating for the public, probably messaging going out sometime between Tuesday and Wednesday of next week with regard to specifics of what they can expect as a family for what distance learning will look like for their children, depending upon what the age of the child is. I've seen some of the preliminary plans, and it's going to include a combination of sending things home and accessing internet video. The governor has said that the intent of the distance learning is to ensure that each student has a daily interaction with the licensed staff and the materials to support that interaction. And so that's the grounding for what we're going off of. I think if we are able to get out the messaging accurately on Tuesday or Wednesday, then we'll start seeing any type of technology soon following after that on Thursday, Friday, maybe even going into the weekend. I am hesitant to promise, just because as this thing unfolds, with everything, we run into a snag here, a snag there, and the snag it doesn't get in the way, it just slows us down a little bit, because then we got to re-problem solve how we're going to do it. And to this point, the team's done a wonderful job. So that's why I say, don't hang your hat on the exact time, but to answer your question, yes, the sequence of events will be continued messaging about what distance learning is going to look like with more detail as we get closer to Wednesday. And then right after that's going to be, how do I get materials? How do I access? What's the expectation? So that's our trajectory, is to have all this in place by next Friday for sure, if not through the weekend.
Thank you.
Question?
Is there any anticipation or talk possibly of using school facilities for hospital efforts or sick?
We haven't had any of those conversations yet.
Okay.
Haven't been asked.
This is really quick. Sorry. Go ahead.
Let's go with Director Pelletier.
Thanks. Just to piggyback on that, and maybe to put Carissa on the spot just a teeny little bit. I've had some friends asking me multiple times how they can give and what they can give, and the email address, and no one has emailed me back, and this, that, and I've been telling people, we're in a crisis mode and we're doing the best we can. You know, that's kind of how I've been responding, and I think, you know, I just want to thank the people who are reaching out and wanting to help in every way they can. And I just wanted to comment that Chris and I had an exchange yesterday, about, you know, just kind of said that you can speak to it, but the email would kick back something like, you know, thank you for your response, and, you know, we'll get to it, this and that. Because I think Mike's idea is excellent with when you brought up the, you know, something like the Purell. You know, is that a need? Do the teachers, things like that. So thank you for doing that, adapting to that. So.
Director Weisberg?
And it was just kind of the same question too, is that, does that website give people, if they have cleaning supplies, that they can donate or things like that, where they could take them, or are we allowed to take public
At this
donations?
point, I don't believe we have that level of detail. As we said, this is really evolving, and we don't even know what those needs are. So some of the ideas you had today are great ideas, and it's something we can look into. At this point, I know people get frustrated because they want to help. At this point, there hasn't been a lot that we can have people helping us with. But as Denise said, this is not a 2-week situation. We're in it for the long haul, so there certainly will be needs. So we've collected the email addresses. A response has been going out to people to let them know that we appreciate it. We'll let them know as soon as we have something to do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Director Potacek?
A couple of questions I've got, and again, I apologize, but I'm saying they're big questions I have. Particularly, we've got 2 items here that are coming up, action items. So maybe it's more appropriate when they come up. One is technology purchases, which is C. And then the second one is the release of funds. I'm concerned because you met with different groups and people are making their needs known. Is there any talk of additional funding, either from the federal government or the state government, particularly to education in schools?
There's talk of it. You know, I think they're talking
Well,
about it
you
at the
said
state.
that senators and representatives, so.
Yeah, and I think it's like anything else, they're all, one of the things that is a challenge for them right now, after talking to Karen Housley, is that my understanding is there's some COVID-19 within the House, and so they are not meeting right now, and if the House isn't meeting, then the Senate isn't meeting. So they are having challenges also, just like we are, getting together to have the conversations to make things move forward. But we've had nothing but support. Commissioner Mary Catherine Ricker has listened to as superintendents and teams what our needs are. We have weekly, or not weekly, we have daily meetings with the commissioner, and she brings that information to with the Department of Health to the governor. We have multiple meetings every day, but our needs are being heard, and I think they will be addressed to the extent that they can.
Yeah, in particular, I'm thinking $21 million the legislature approved, and I believe the governor signed, and I'm just wondering, within that, is there anything particularly earmarked for schools? And again, I think the feds have passed some money. I haven't heard anything that particularly was directed at schools nationally.
Right, and I'm the same for me. It's been mostly about healthcare and helping have more respirators and healthcare and that kind of thing. I think we will get some in education. I just think the healthcare piece is taking priority right now.
Yeah.
Director Riley?
I just want to add too that we had to put those on the agenda for now, just so we don't slow the process and we have what we need right away to keep things moving.
Right, thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you very much. We're moving on to action items. We have, item A is the Auditor Services, and I have Director Riley and Director Hoheisel. Who wants it to go?
Okay, it'll just be quick. So on October 11th and October 18th, 2019, Stillwater Area Public Schools advertised for written proposals from certified public accounting firms to audit its financial statements for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020, with the option of auditing its financial statements for each of the 4 subsequent fiscal years. On Tuesday, November 5th, 2019, Stillwater Area Public Schools received written proposals from 4 certified public accounting firms to audit its financial statements according to the specifications and conditions of the request for proposals. The district's Finance and Operations Working Group met on February 20th, 2020 to review the proposals and came to the unanimous conclusion to recommend Clifton Larson Allen. The information was brought to the board as a report at the March 5th, 2020 regular meeting, and the responses have been available, and hopefully you've had a chance to review them. At this time, I'd like to recommend Clifton Larson Allen as the district auditor for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020.
All right, so we have a motion. Can we have a second? Second. Director Weisberg? Anybody have any questions before we vote? Oh, Pelletier.
Not really a question. I guess a question. I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank our auditor, MMKR, for some 20 years or so. They've been with us. They've done an exceptional job for us. That being said, I don't construe this decision as a negative one. 20 years with one vendor should be seen as a magnificent compliment to their work. That being said, again, there's nothing wrong with giving our finances a fresh set of eyes. And while I'm very thankful for them, I do wholeheartedly support this decision. And I wanted to just let everyone know, I did contact Director of Finance, Kristen Hoheisel, regarding this. I wanted your professional opinion, and you gave it to me. And I just wanted to ask you, perhaps you could speak to that as well, just for the sake of the rest of the board as well as the public.
Absolutely, and I spoke to it when we were in the Finance and Operations Work Group as you guys were reviewing this work. Auditing the rules that auditors need to follow and how they go about their business is very standardized. They don't have the ability to deviate, so quite honestly, any auditor you choose is going to perform the work that they are required to perform. My only ask for consideration was that that the auditors continue to meet our timelines as far as availability to do the work. We like to get our numbers early because then it allows us to have the best set of numbers as we're working moving forward. In absence of timelines, I see no reason why any audit firm wouldn't fit the bill, if you will, for the required services of this district.
Thank you. Anyone else? Director Pearson?
Well, and I just wanted to add, thank you for that. I wanted to add, we've had some questions about why are we doing this? Mostly because it's time to do it. Part of the cycle, we're trying to keep a cycle of reviewing all of our vendors, and this was time. So no reason, just that it's time, and I agree that a fresh set of eyes is good every now and then.
Anyone else? All right, all in favor of going with the auditor that's been proposed, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, it is unanimous. Thank you. All right, the next is our final reading and action for the policies. 101, the legal status of the school district. 101.1, the name of the school district. 102, the equal education opportunity. 103, complaints, students, employees, parents, and other people. And 104, school district mission statement. And I will turn it over to Director Burns.
Thank you, Chair Stivland. This will be our third and final reading of these policies. We really haven't had much. I had a few emails come in, but I don't think that they were directed to changes that we would consider at this time. I'll say the one that was the name of the school district, looking to potentially name our school district from Stillwater area public schools to North Washington County schools. Could be a consideration in the future. I think that unless we want to discuss it at this point, I would be in favor of leaving it as Stillwater area public schools. That's in policy 101.1. Does anybody have any questions or comments about these 5 policies?
I just have one, just comment to that one because I thought of it too. Our issue with changing it to that is that there's more north of us in Washington County, so
Yeah,
it
that's a
might
good
be
point.
tricky
That's
to
a good
have
point.
that, but we could look at it another time.
Was that a few individuals?
No,
Just
that was just
one.
one.
Oh,
Yep.
Just one.
okay, thank you. And I mean, I don't mean to not respect that one. I mean, it's always interesting. What I find sometimes though with name changes, especially if you say North Washington County, almost unanimously what you're gonna get from other people till time goes on is they say, oh, you mean Stillwater area. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I think we had that discussion somewhat when we considered even renaming our 2 middle schools. And so I think for a lot of people, including myself, I respect tradition and what has been as well.
As a trademark attorney, having a brand is somewhat valuable too. So.
And it's very expensive to change.
It would be expensive to change, yes, very expensive. I was just gonna make a comment that these are 5 policies that we did not make any changes to. And so going forward, we've received direction from legal counsel that it isn't necessary for us to bring forward a policy that's required to be reviewed. We're required to review these every 2 years, and so that's what we're doing right now. But we don't need to bring them to the whole board. We can just review them at the policy group level, and then if no changes are recommended, we will just leave them alone. But I wanted to bring that up here in case any board members would have a problem with that, because we certainly can use the procedure that we've used for these 5, sorry. We can have the 3 readings that we typically would go through for a policy update. So I'm just saying that out loud right now in case anybody has a comment or thought about that. Are you comfortable with us reviewing policies at the policy working group level? If we're not recommending any changes, are you comfortable with us just getting that work done at the policy level?
Well, I would say if we could discuss that at policy, because I think that might be a little bit bigger conversation. Because some of our policies, we might not know if they've been, and then it looks like we've had the same policy since 1985, or, because I don't know that our group should do anything that would change the date on the actual policy. So I think it's probably something that would take further conversation.
Okay,
A heavy recommendation, I think, as I've mentioned at our last meeting, is that Sarah and Sherry and I attended officers' training, and they made a heavy recommendation that the board not bring all those policies, especially if it's unanimous, if the working group looks at it. But they did recommend that you would state that on the policy the last time it was looked at. So if you went through these same 4 or 5 policies, decided there were no changes, you'd indicate somehow that they were looked at. And so it's a case of where a lot of times I hear people come forward and they'll say, this hasn't been looked at for 10 years. Well, maybe it did, but they said no change.
right.
So that would notice the fact that it was looked at in 2020, just no changes were suggested at that point.
Okay.
I-
Director Pelletier?
Yeah, I wanted earlier just to comment when you were talking about the email that we received. I wanted to validate that person. I did respond. It's a tough one for me because I certainly understand the rationale going into that. And I'm always so thankful when I hear people that speak up, especially about something that hasn't really gotten a lot of, public, acknowledgement. My personal, it's tough for me, Stillwater, the branding is accurate. Stillwater is the oldest town in the state of Minnesota, and it's the oldest district. And to me, that really, it's unique. And that's where I struggle a little bit with that. But I did want to heavily validate and thank the person for reaching out. So I'm torn on this a little bit, I guess, because I absolutely understand that we bring every single one up if it's gonna be a unanimous no change. And then I also wonder, I just don't want to, in any way, shape, or form, prevent people from knowing that we're having these discussions and giving them the opportunity to weigh in at some point. So that's where I struggle with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Director Riley? Director Riley?
So my question goes into all of that, where if you're just doing this in policy, you are going to, I'm assuming through your notes that you publish, explain where you are. So if anybody needs or wants to be kept up to date as to what you're doing and have the opportunity to weigh in or have a question, those are all published on the website in your working group notes, correct?
Excellent,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
And that's another good reason why our meetings are open, posted. Anybody can come, anybody can watch them. We do have notes on them, yes.
That was my same question. I just thought, how would people know which ones you were dealing with if it didn't come before the board? But if it's on the notes, then that makes more sense. And it would only apply to policies that no changes were happening.
No changes at all, right.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that the name is Stillwater Area.
Yeah.
Area,
It's not
Right.
Stillwater, it's much more inclusive,
right,
the official name.
that's right. All right, any other thoughts or comments before we vote? All right, all those in favor of approving these 5 policies, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, it is unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, item C.
Was there a second on that? Was there a motion and a second?
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know that there was a motion or a second.
no, yeah, we did. We had
Oh,
Yeah, I seconded.
oh, you did? Okay.
presented.
sorry.
Oh,
Okay.
no, I'm sorry.
That was the
I
last
did.
one.
That was
Better
the
make
auditor.
better
All
make
right.
it formal.
I'm so sorry.
We'll go to the chair.
I'll make
so
a formal motion that, that we approve each of policies 101, 101.1, 102, 103, and 104 as presented in the board packet.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Director Weisberg. All right, now let's have a vote. All those in favor of approving these policies, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, thank you. All right, now we got it right. Thank you very much. All right, moving on, the technology purchases. I have Director Riley listed to talk about this.
Okay, So Chair Stivlin and I met with John Perry this week to discuss his need of the ability to make purchases to prepare for e-learning without needing to wait for our regularly scheduled board meetings for approval. Devices are currently being prepped and getting ready to be sent home. Many of these devices are at the end of their licensing, and with that goes updates and support. We have the ability to service devices here, but the compatibility will start to diminish and the functionality will be at risk. John will need $200,000 from the unassigned fund balance right now to purchase additional devices and licensing. And I believe that includes phones, and I think he's already purchased hotspots to go out as well. He'll provide updates and keep the board informed should he foresee any other needs that arise. I also express that if there is an urgency, to let us know, and we'll work with him to resolve any immediate needs that come up. Anybody else?
All right, so I'd like a motion to approve the $200,000 for technology equipment for students and staff to facilitate successful distance learning experiences due to the COVID-19 virus quarantine.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Dr. Director Weisberg and a second from Director Pearson. All right, any questions or comments? Director Weisberg.
I just had, are we doing surveys to see what the need is? I mean, as far as if people actually do have computers and somebody else could use the one they got?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, they've already had an idea, and then over the last couple of days, teachers through building principals have had teachers call every one of their students, and those questions were actually asked if there is a need for many things, whether it's technology, whether it's food, or any of those things. And I had really great conversations with my daughter's teacher as well.
Did you have something you wanted to add to that? Okay. All right, Director Potashik.
I would just like to be kept appraised as we purchase
Yes.
these materials, what they go for,
I can speak to that now if you'd like.
please.
So in John and my planning, with regard to technology, one of the things that we knew that was going to be up and coming was a need for about 300, up to 300 Chromebooks, not just for this, but moving into what's the next phase. And so that's what part of this dollar amount is going for. The second piece is for what's called soft phone, which is a phone system that allows us to access our phone system as if we were sitting in the office, but with our cell phones, our home phones, our computers, as we have people working. So that's what the other roughly $100,000 of this $200,000 is going for. So to answer your question, does that answer the question? That's what
Yeah,
this
just
specific.
repeat that first part, 300 Chromebooks at about,
Up to 300 Chromebooks in the soft phone system is what this $200,000 is intended to purchase.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Pearson.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, just wondering, when I took the call today, we don't have as many devices as we have children, but they thought that that would be okay,
Right.
that they won't be all, it's not gonna be like you're sitting in a classroom for every
Correct.
class, right?
Right now, what we're doing with that survey is getting a read on how many students are in as many of you are parents and listen to the questions. So the information we're collecting is what grade level? Do they have access to a device? Do they have access to the internet? Are there other people in your household that need a device and you have to share it? What's the likelihood that you'll be able to use it? Right now, the focus on, if you want to think of it as making sure that each individual student has a device at home, is geared towards 6 through 12. Because that's where we use Schoology, and the actual interaction right now with teachers is putting that online. Moving forward, we kind of move down, again, to use the software like Seesaw and things like that. So the importance for kindergarten through 5th grade is access of a technology device to view the Seesaw, to interact with the Seesaw, whereas secondary, it's more of what you experience with your older kids, where they need to be online and actually doing something with that device.
Okay. Director Burns?
So I think you mentioned that some of these purchases of the Chromebooks is in a way an acceleration from what we would have. Can you maybe speak to what we would have expected to be in the budget for next year for purchasing Chromebooks?
Yep.
And is this, in a way, an acceleration?
I wouldn't call it an acceleration. Two things go on as we plan. You'll notice that the last couple of years in the springtime, John has come to the school board and said, I'd like to purchase X amount of carts to replace X amount of older carts. So to that end, I would say, yes, it's an acceleration, but it's an acceleration of that conversation. It's not an acceleration of having more devices than we would have if we would have transferred them out. The second piece to the question is, it's an acceleration in thought, and that is just like every other manufacturing line right now. The first people in the queue are the first ones that are gonna get it later on. And so one of the things that we wanna make sure we're paying attention to is not just for right now, but in the fall. And so even if we don't see all the devices tomorrow, when can we get Stillwater area schools in the queue so that when we get to the fall, we're still on track for what John would have asked for, let's say in May or June, to replenish the carts at a minimum? Does that help clarify that?
Yes.
Okay, and
A related question I have, you talked about the concentration of these, or the target 612. One of the questions, and I ask it really kind of rhetorically at this point, I don't need an answer, but I'm saying down the line, next meeting or whatever, or as teachers get together and plan, I've been asked by individuals, how do you do distance learning for very young children? Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, et cetera. And so what I'm saying, at some point, I wish you'd address that, just even a broadband. It's kind of easy for me as a secondary educator myself to visualize high school kids or middle school kids. It's much harder to say, well, how do you do that at home, or
Sure,
how
we'll
do you
have,
deliver that?
and there'll be essentially two rollouts. So if we assume that we wouldn't be back in session on March 30th, right now the elementary teachers are putting together 2 weeks worth of materials for those elementary students, which will probably most likely come home in a packet form and then be backed up by that online seesaw instruction. So if you were to visualize it, again, as a very broad stroke, you could imagine as a parent that you could log in and you'd have your student's teacher in a seesaw video explaining, here's what, let's say, choice board 1A looks like, and I'm making that up. But here's what I expect the kids to be able to do after completing choice board A, and maybe there's a reading, maybe there's explanation of an activity that goes along with it. That's the type of thing, again, broad stroke, parents probably could expect for those first 2 weeks. Now, once the elementary teachers continue on these next totality of these next 8 days, after that 2 weeks is when it probably will get a little more clear and we can figure out more details. Back to the question of how many people actually have devices. You know, are we set up where we can be more technologically advanced with how we interact with parents? Right now, family-wise, we hover right around 95% of our families having internet access. And remember, internet access differs by family. Some families can have 1 device on and other families can have 10 devices on, depending upon what plan they have. And then the amount of devices varies. So we'll get to the second part of your question probably in, I would say, 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that part really, that early part really depends on the parent a lot.
I think we're gonna find that for all districts in the
Yeah.
state. There's gonna be a high parent dependency to help get this kicked off if we don't have school back on March 30th.
Thank you.
Dr. Pelletier?
Thanks. I did, you know, I talked to John Perry the other day and I walked away nervous, and, you know, perhaps you can alleviate some of my nerves, but I guess I'm a little bit worried about things that we can't control, obviously, long-term concerns. You know, the race to get the Chromebooks, and then, you know, I know that he had some that he was able to, and we didn't switch, and now, you know, those went away, and everyone's in a race. And what happens, you know, supply and demand, and then the price goes up, and the whole thing, the economics of it. So I guess my concern is marginally twofold. I mean, I know that we can't predict, but how can we help? You know, I just want to I want this board to make it easy on staff as things come up. I don't want red tape, I guess, so maybe it's not a question, maybe it's a statement. I just I want us to make it easy on you and not have you waiting, like if you need to do something, you need to do it. So any feedback at any time that you can provide that we can help you facilitate, I'm gonna believe we're all in this, and I certainly think we all want the same thing, so.
We'll be in a much better position by this time next week to start giving you some more detailed, here's where we think we are, here's what we think the needs are 3 weeks out. It's gonna take us until next Thursday, next Friday to really know exactly what that looks like, and I think we'll be in a position to give you the answers to those questions and forecast it better for you.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion to approve $200,000 for technology equipment for students and staff to facilitate successful distance learning experiences due to the COVID-19 virus quarantine. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Can I stop? I had provided resolutions. Because you are
I didn't
committing
see those.
funds, you need to do this via resolution. It can't just be an action item.
Oh, I didn't get those.
Sure he has.
And does that recall a roll call vote then?
Yes, for a resolution.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Thank you. Okay. The resolution designating funding for technology purposes. Whereas the School Board of Stillwater Area Public Schools has a policy to maintain a 5% fund balance, whereas the fund balance currently has a surplus, and the administration recommends designating a portion of the surplus. Whereas the School Board of Stillwater Area Public Schools will designate $200,000 from its fund balance surplus for technology purposes. Therefore, be it resolved, the designated money will be used for technology purposes. Do we have to do a roll call? Is that what you're saying?
One
Okay.
question before that, then. The way this reads is it's not perceived to go below 5% at this point.
That is correct. Also, so, and just to, because this came, and I wasn't aware as an action item prior to the agenda coming out. This came in front, and what the board is doing is there's different categories. We've talked about this, where you have your unassigned fund balance, you have your assigned fund balance, you have your committed, your reserved. This is a commitment. This is the board action. You can't assign it as a board. That's administration's job, but you commit. The money goes into that holding pattern, that tank, if you will. And should the money not get spent, the board has to do a resolution to release it. Otherwise, it will sit there, but that is the intent. It's an accounting procedure that needs to take place.
Thank you.
All right, so we need a roll call. Can you do that?
I can.
Okay.
Director Burns,
Aye.
Vice Chair Pearson,
Aye.
Director Pelletier,
Aye.
Director Potacek,
Aye.
Treasurer Riley,
Aye.
Chair Stivland,
Aye.
Director Weisberg.
All right, so it
Have a
is
7.
7-0, it is unanimous. Okay, thank you. Moving on, item D is the emergency COVID-19 release of funds, and I will turn it over to Montrelli.
So you already asked a lot of questions about how you could make this easier, and Director Riley talked a little bit about the technology. This is a key we might need. It might be something with, medical and sanitation, keeping our kids and staff safe. It could be something as simple as if we look at electronic meeting for you, if we have a meeting over an hour, which we might, we need to have a Zoom license, so that's something that we need to take a look at. It could be software, it could be internet access, hotspots for families that we might need. We just don't really know. And from now until April 9th, we have 9 weeks that we think there'll be a lot of change. And so we had a conversation with Chair Stillen and Director Pearson about having some access to some funds. Again, it'd be used specifically for the COVID emergency. We'd be able to track that information. We'd share that with you and say, you know, here's a need that we have, so that you're aware of what that spending might be. But it gives us some flexibility to address the needs of our kids or families in a timely manner. For some of these things, it is ordering and getting it and being able to place that order in a timely manner. So we're requesting that additional funds be made available at a future date as needed. And the recommendation is for a motion to make $250,000 available for any need that arises related to the COVID-19 quarantine. And we will give the board updates when we perceive that we're going to be accessing or needing funds.
All right, thank you. Can I have a motion to approve? Oh, we gotta do the resolution, sorry. Do you wanna have
I
questions?
do have a question.
Okay.
Is this outside of technology, including technology?
Well, we would use the technology funds first.
Okay.
We're fairly close in that 200,000. I think Director Perry had shared that one of them was about 94, 96, and the other in 84 maybe.
Yes.
So we're gonna be pretty close to that. If there are increased technology needs, then that could be part of it. You know, if you prefer to keep technology totally separate, we could, but this would where we'd be taking the funds from. Yeah, so it could include technology.
Okay. Do you have a preference about that?
I guess I would like to learn a little bit more, get some other perspectives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Director Patasche?
I'm the same way. Could you give us any kind of broad ideas of where this might go?
I think I
Or
tried
themes?
to, and we aren't sure. I mean, software, medical technology. Another example is we are currently paying for childcare, but we don't have families paying for childcare. We're directed by the state to offer it free through community education. So we have staff working and we don't have funds coming in like we normally would. So that's another example.
So it seems to me that there's going to be a huge need in what community ed normally would pick up there.
I think that'll be true unless something changes at the state level. And we are advocating, and as you know, Annette Selman is very much active down at the legislature asking for funds to be able to make community ed whole again, because it's been kind of well, community ed can take care of that. And it really has an impact on her budget. So yes, it'll be something that we'll have to consistently come back and take a look at.
And
Okay.
this will probably involve hundreds of thousands of dollars.
If it continues.
Yep, I'll defer to
Yeah,
Director.
so maybe just to put a little perspective, what we're asking for here is, as an example, at least in my mind right now, so every day we have a Zoom meeting with all the leads of all the different areas that we have in charge of taking care of stuff, and one of the things we try to go through is what's popped up in your world as far as what you're seeing. What we anticipate is the stuff we don't know that's coming, and so all we're asking for, really, at least to start, and maybe we won't use the 250,000, you know, we may not, but what we're trying to do is say, can we have some money that's just designated so that if, for example, there becomes something we've got to get for materials for kids and we need to get it today, what we're not doing is getting hung up in our particular process. So I could tell Rachel Larson or I could tell Annette Solomon for early childhood, okay, we're running it through this process. This makes sense to fall into this category that the board has approved, and be aware this is what I'm going to report to the board that we're spending this on. So the idea is for us to keep you very much so in the loop of what that's being spent on. But I think limiting it right now to that 250 at least gets us into the near future. I don't anticipate it being these large costs, but at the same time, what's been brought up before, I don't know what's gonna happen in a week and what might that be. So it allows us just a little bit of flexibility to purchase some things that might come up that we may not otherwise need, to run through more of that fast process, I guess, that's all.
And it could be as simple as, like, right now, I know we have a site that is putting to, and we can cover it with supply costs, but we have a site that's putting together totes to be able to then us take those totes and deliver them in mass to the students of that particular area. I mean, it really, when, $250,000 is a lot of money, but when you're serving 8,500 kids and you start breaking that down, I mean, it's just supplies that we might not have a budget for, an approved budget for. It could be cleaning
another good
items,
one.
it could be, it's kind of those situations that we can't speak to because we don't know what they are right now until they come up. It could be a method of curriculum that all of a sudden it's like something becomes available for the younger elementary kids that might be a quick answer, a good solution for us that we want to get out the door and get it now to help continue with the distance learning. So that's the challenge. I understand with the board, it's $250,000 and you're apprehensive, but it really could be a bunch of smaller items as well.
Perfect thing that's in the works right now is our intent to make sure we get the elementary packets out to all the families is to mail them via US mail. You can imagine the cost that's gonna come in, but it's the most efficient way we can ensure that all of our families get it, the most equitable way. So it's stuff like that, that as you're planning, it comes up and you go, this makes sense, but it's gonna cost something.
And my concern is this, number one always is, like Jen mentioned earlier, I don't want red tape to stop people when time and efficiency are very much out there. But at the same time, similar to what we talked about with technology, I'd like to see where the money's being spent.
Yep.
So especially if the next meeting's not till April 9th, it seems to me you'll have better indications at that point what your needs are and what areas you're targeting.
And we want to make sure you know what we're spending that on, because that helps you to communicate with the community, right? If we're going to allocate these dollars, I mean, one of the things we're doing both with allocation of staff and resources is tracking everything. So that's not going to be a problem at all to understand what's going where in this.
Yeah, I could imagine it being part of the report that we have, this ongoing report for the COVID-19 response. Here's what came up this time. This is what we're working on. I would actually like to see these two funds kept separate so that if there's technology needs, we keep those separate. And if there's other sort of all other things. Personally, I just think that this is gonna be such a technology-driven experience that it'll be really interesting to keep them really separate, to see how much was the expense overall when we're all through with all of this. How much was it a technology experience and how much was it other things? I personally would like to see that.
With the UFARS coding, you will have that.
Okay.
Because all of the COVID codes and the money that's reserved will have a particular course code that's attached. Technology, like we do everything else, you track by department or program or what's going on. Technology will have theirs, everything else will have theirs. So it will be very easy for you to track financial data on what went where.
Okay, so when we say we just approved 200,000 for technology, that's gonna go in those codes, but this one will be for anything else that's not a technology.
Well, actually, they just sit in a reserved account and we apply those codes against it. So
Right,
we
that's what I
create
mean,
codes as we
right.
go, but you will the way the accounting system is designed is for that breakdown, and then should the technology money run out and the dollars then come out of the other pot, it'll still be tracked as technology, but you as a board will know you've overspent the 200,000 and we continue to use the 250 for technology purposes.
I guess I don't know, I'd really be curious to know what other board members think, but if we overspend the 200,000 for technology and there is additional need, what I would like to see happen is you come forward with another request. And let's talk about what the need is, and let's do another 200 or whatever it is.
We won't, in
Okay.
talking with John, I think we're gonna stay within that 200,000 on that technology. Before we would come back to you and say.
Come back to us if
We
you
will.
need more, but I think I would really rather keep them separate so that we're not spilling over into.
In my mind, they would be, I know there's UFARS codes and on that's, in my mind, how I have this, the technology thing is a separate item. This 250,000 is a separate item that at the same token, we may not need 250,000. There are so many people that are offering free stuff right now that the 250 for this might sit there.
Well, I
So
think-
it could go that way too.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we talked about, what I heard most clearly was this issue of the losses that were going to be incurred from community ed as a result of non-participation in things like the PAC and, you know, some of the student activities and, you know, all of the different classes and things that we have. And then obviously the preschool, which is a big, big chunk of funds that aren't going to be coming into their budget. So that's what I heard was going to be a big deal. And I think that's going to possibly be ongoing for a while, so.
Right, and we'll come back when we have more guidance.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of questions right now at the state for what might happen. Even for childcare, we are taking care of level 1, emergency workers. Well, we got an email saying, well, here's level 2 that we'd like you to help out. And on level 2 was the transportation for Cub for groceries. And, you know, it gets to be pretty big. So we are doing level 1 now, well, we think, and we'll look at level 2 with you. But there's a lot more clarification that needs to come from the state on some of these things before we can move ahead any further. And we will certainly bring that to you and have some conversation in a report.
I do know one specific thing that's going to be coming forward, and as we move to flexible places for people to work, as we do more of the telework, I'm anticipating things like requests for headsets to come in. As people are working from home and they have their families in their homes, they're gonna need to be able to hear and talk without everything.
It's not the Bose
And-
ones that
yeah,
cost like
right.
$300.
And we don't typically spend money on that. So as an example, that's something that's gonna be a real expense for a large number of people if we go into this long term, that we may have to
Yeah,
order.
absolutely. Director Riley?
I'd just like to add that we did have a really good conversation with John about this, and he was okay with the $200,000 amount and was very agreeable in coming back if he thought he would need more than that. I would like to, I think, keep them separate and then just, I mean, it was a long, good conversation, and I think he was pleased when we left.
Yep. Director Burns?
So I just have a question, I think it's an accounting type question, but mechanically, how is this different if we kind of pre-approve? And I'm assuming this comes out of the unassigned fund.
Yes.
And what is mechanically, how is it different if we pre-approve that versus if you, in effect, deficit spend? You're spending down your existing funds. And then you'd come to us and say, well, because of these challenges that we've had, we've spent, now we need to replenish. How is it different mechanically? How does our pre-approval tonight make it easier? What is it?
In a few ways. So first off, you do already have a revised budget that's been approved. These expenses will not be part of that revised budget. So you would either need to do an updated revised budget to include it, knowing you're going to withdraw, or quite honestly, we can't knowingly deficit spend. And so I wouldn't have board approval, which means I would need to be coming to the board every time we're going to make a purchase to say, we're $3,000 deficit. I need you to know, this is not a part of the approved budget, and so that's therefore the process. By doing the pre-approval, you're earmarking those funds. You're saying, like for the technology, this is all you can spend that money on. So there's no opportunity, you've heard me talk about the budget in the past, and sometimes one line item is high and the other is low, and we go by program, and you kind of ebb and flow in between. This is very restrictive. We can't use this money for anything other than what is designed in the resolution, and it prevents us from having to come forward either with an updated revised budget in different categories of which we may or may not know, or you having to meet every time we need to buy something.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Question?
Did you have something, Director Weisberg?
Yes, I'm sorry. When you were talking about the community ed childcare, right now, that's only for healthcare workers, correct?
There's actually a pretty big list of people who are included in that with the,
Grocery, right?
well,
Groceries is tier 2.
groceries tier 2,
Yeah.
but anything related to healthcare. So it's
Pharmacists got it to it.
I can read the list if,
Do you have it there,
really quick,
Shelley?
yep.
Thank
It says providers of healthcare, emergency, medical.
And that would be able to provide support?
At this time, no, because I honestly don't know what the ramifications are that would be something we'd have to talk some more about.
Well, and I would say, as far as donations go, if you just follow district policy, the board needs to approve district donations. So people can make donations to the district, and they can even earmark those donations to the district. The board needs to formally approve those donations, which I believe you did tonight, or at least the list was provided tonight.
I think it takes unanimous, doesn't it?
For a donation?
It's, yeah,
We could
gifts.
Get into that, yeah.
Oh, that, I,
Double check it. When we went through that training again, they bring out these obscure things.
It came
But I hope I'm wrong, but I think it, and I can't see why we would turn down donations, but I can think of one
right, but
situation.
just so there is an understanding that when people make donations to a district, we are a 50, we're not a 501c3, but we are a tax deduction for people, if you will, and maybe that, there's different rules. It's just not going to be available right away. It could, because the board will need to take action. It's not like they can put the money through us and we're cutting a check tomorrow for the same thing that they requested it go towards. We'd have to hold it, apply it, the board would have to know it, and then we'd use those funds accordingly. Of course, we'll take donations. Anybody wants to give donations, it's just it's more of a process than just money in, money out.
Okay. Director Pelletier?
Thank you. I just again to say there's no precedent for this, right? We're in a pandemic crisis health mode here, and I can think of some other things in this agenda that might help us save some money later on. So I applaud the efforts for keeping it as low as possible. I continue to say I want to cut any red tape and any hardship from our end so you can get your work done. And I'm ready to go. So do you want to, is that a roll call or how does that go?
Any other questions or
Do we need a
comments
motion?
before we vote?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we have a resolution designating funding for COVID-19 related needs. Whereas the School Board of Stillwater Area Public Schools has a policy to maintain a 5% fund balance, whereas the fund balance currently has a surplus, and the administration recommends designating a portion of the surplus, whereas the School Board of Stillwater Area Public Schools will designate $250,000 from its fund balance surplus for COVID-19 related needs. Therefore, be it resolved, the designated money will be used for COVID-19 related needs. And we'll have a roll call.
Director Burns,
Aye.
Vice Chair Pearson,
Aye.
Director Pelletier,
Aye.
Director Potacek,
Aye.
Treasurer Riley,
Aye.
Chair Stivland,
Aye.
Director Weisberg.
Aye.
We have unanimous vote.
Thank you. Okay. Item E. Over the past 3 months, a mountain of information has come to light related to the bus terminal project on Hudson Road in Lake Elmo. Right now, we have more questions than answers, and so it is very appropriate and necessary for us to hire a trusted outside resource to conduct an investigation of this project. It is in the best interest of the board, the school district, and the community to gain a comprehensive understanding of what has happened, why it has happened, and what solutions may exist to resolve some of the problems that exist now. And so, I am making a motion to authorize an investigation of the bus garage project and to retain Attorney Pamela Harris and audit firm KDV Bergen for this purpose. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Director Weisberg is the second. Now we have time for comments and questions. Director Burns.
Thank you. So I've got a few questions, but I want to start by asking kind of what are we authorizing by this motion? I look at the words, and it's investigation of the bus garage project, but I'm unsure about what is the scope, what are the parameters, what is the cost, what is the timeline. So I have those questions, and I wonder why don't we in this case proceed more like we typically do as a board, where we seek kind of specific bids from a vendor, RFP, and then we select from those proposals based on the pros and cons of each. And then we'd look at, you know, what the costs are, what timelines. We would know that information before we approve it. So it's how we selected the auditor tonight. It's how we selected the paving contractor tonight. And so I feel like we could tonight go through and define what it is that we are interested in having an investigation, and then obtain the specific kind of bids, if you will, the proposals from different vendors, and then we would be able to make an informed decision on what the costs are, the timeline, and that kind of thing. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
First of all, I just would like to clarify that I don't believe we're required to go out for RFPs for a service such as this. But it's something we can do if we want, but we're not required to.
Okay.
Did you have?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that with the course of the investigation, each board member would be interviewed, and then the scope would be determined from a lot of the questions. But right now, there are so many questions to how we got to this point that I think the community is also demanding this at this time.
And I'm not saying that, you know, we shouldn't do an investigation. What
would be, why would we want to put it off?
I don't want to necessarily put it off, but what I do want to do is make sure that when we vote to approve this, that essentially we know at least the broad parameters of what we're approving that are more defined than just simply the bus garage project. I mean, you know, for example, we know that there are several different kind of entities that were involved in the project. We have administration, we have past board, we have current board, we have our district legal counsel who advised the district, you know, leading up to the negotiation of the purchase agreement and afterward. And there are questions of the advice that was given by our district legal counsel. There was a real estate agent, I believe, that was involved. And to the extent that we can, I know that we can't be interviewing them, but there's also the land developer and the city of Lake Elmo. We may have received communications from them. Those are all entities that were involved in it. And I would want to make sure that when we approve an investigation, that kind of all of that at a minimum, there may be more that might come out. But when we're going to approve an investigation, that it's at least defined enough so that we know that we can check those boxes. Those things that we know that each one of those entities, we're gonna investigate, we're gonna learn information from.
Mark, I honestly think you just defined it.
That's what I
You
was
just
thinking
defined it.
too.
Start, beginning, middle, and end. You defined it. And I think when we are interviewed by this person, you know, as part of the investigation, we'll be able to ask the questions that we have, that we want answers to, and that will help define the scope as well. But I think you just said exactly, there are lots of entities involved. There's lots of different time points in terms of how it, you know, beginning, middle, and end, and where we are now. You know, that's the scope. That's what I think anyways. Did somebody else have something they wanted to ask? Director Riley?
I would agree, and I think, you know, you'll have that opportunity to speak to the investigator when you are interviewed regarding those concerns. I guess I would be a little concerned with trying to limit what the investigation is, and so I think it would be most appropriate that everybody has the opportunity to bring those things up.
And I don't propose to limit it. What I would propose is to make sure that we have, you know, kind of the at least defined, so that we know that at a minimum, we're going to be, whatever investigation that we approve is going to check those boxes. And that's where, when I see the wording of the motion, it doesn't necessarily define that. And that's, yeah, that was one of the parts that I would like to have that defined before we approve it. In some way, we can do it, we could potentially do it verbally, But I do
guess
want it to have it
My
defined.
question is, where is the appropriate place to have those conversations about what the boxes are that need to be checked? And I just don't know that that is something we want to do at this meeting or at a, I mean, I think it's an individual conversation with the investigator who has experience and knowledge about how to proceed. And so whatever questions you have, whatever boxes you want to make sure are checked, that is absolutely within your prerogative. That is you have freedom to put those out there. Director Tatchik?
I like your questions, and I like the fact that you're really putting some flesh on a skeleton and saying, okay, these are sort of, and I liked what Liz said, I would expect that each board member would be considered. But it's almost like you make a list of players, people who were involved in the process and their perspectives, and they would share that. And then a lot of the topical areas, which you mentioned. And I would like to see a list that is more inclusive rather than narrowing, because narrowing tends to get to that conclusion too quick. And so I want to make sure that every board member gets kind of a hearing on that. The other one, though, that you mentioned, two areas, and I think they should be dealt with a little bit tonight, at least to get a little more flesh on it, whether we go as the motion on the floor is, or something different bid-wise. I'm setting that aside for now, but I think also talk a little bit about timeline. Is this something that we're gonna do 3 or 4 months, or is it 6 months? Sometimes it could get a life of its own and never end, and I don't think we want that. And then the other one is potential cost. Because at least I saw some resumes, and in some of those I saw cost, and those also, depending on how ambitious you want this to be, vary a great deal.
And I agree very much, Dr. Potachuk. I don't mean to jump in without Board Chair Stivlin giving me the okay, but I agree with that very much. That's where I'm coming from, is that I would like to, my preference with this would be to put some kind of at least as parameters, not defining this as only what we would look at, but I want to make sure that we have kind of our main boxes checked. And I feel like we could then, if we approve, we say that we're going to proceed with an investigation that's going to include at least this much. Then we can get more information from the potential candidates and say, what's the timeline? How much is it gonna cost? Because they can look at our approval and say, there's still a lot of variables that go with this, but they'll have an idea of how many different entities they need to look at, and they will be able to give us at least an idea of, is it gonna be 2 months? Is it gonna be a year? Is it, how much is it going to cost? And then we can look at, I feel like then we can look at the different candidates that we have, and we can make a more informed decision. I know that breaks this up into 2 separate meetings, but I feel like we make a more informed decision if we do that.
Director Weisberg?
And I think just like the things we're voting on tonight with the coronavirus, it has to be a broad wording because we don't know exactly where it's going to go at this point. And because they're going to interview all board members and all parties that were involved, it might continue. And yes, timeline, I agree we should, I'm happy to put a timeline. I'm happy to say I don't want to spend more than a certain amount of money, but I'm not happy to postpone it anymore because it's gone on long enough with a lot of questions, and questions need to start answering.
Director Pelletier?
Thank you. I'll just throw out one of many concerns I have, and I also emailed Chair Stivlin about this, and I'm never not in favor of an investigation of learning about all levels of a project, and that, I've always been in favor of. However, as I look at this, the person that is in this motion, we've got a situation here where the city of Lake Elmo and District 834 were from the same exact law firm throughout this process. In fact, in many circumstances, from what I understand, the same actual attorney was advising both the city of Lake Elmo and the school district. you go online and look at Minnesota Rules of Professional Conduct, conflict of interest, we're 1.7. A lawyer shall not represent a client if representation involves a concurrent conflict of interest. Yikes, and I guess my question is then, who gave you, or did you find this person that is recommended, or where did you get the name?
Both of
Pamela
these-
Harris,
both-
who gave you that
Both of these
name?
firms were recommended by our district legal
So
counsel.
the same counsel that I just mentioned, okay.
Okay, I have a question. You are making conclusatory remarks prior to an investigation. You're talking about conflict of interest, which is a judgment call that you're making prior to the investigation, which is what we're trying to avoid.
Well, if we want to cover every single angle that I thought we did, I think we need to do that at some point. Where you have an
That's
action
not
item?
your job.
You have an
That's the
action item on table. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and when are we going to talk about this? I think it needs to be
That's the
said.
investigator's job. It's not your job to make a conclusion.
Did you just say the investigator that you recommended is brought to us as a recommendation from our current counsel? That's my question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, a little bit of caution, though, on
Well,
the
there's a lot of
accusation.
caution.
Yeah,
There's a lot of caution needed in
little-
all of this.
yeah, but an allegation
Yeah.
that someone did in
I
fact
was just
have-
reading a fact about the, who handled it, and
I
I want that
guess-
stated.
I guess I want to acknowledge that everything you've said is true, that we've had legal counsel from a certain company, and very, very commonly, you have multiple lawyers from the same company doing different services for you because they have different areas of expertise. This is not unusual. This is incredibly common. It is not inappropriate. It's very, very normal, and there's nothing to be concerned about with that. And the fact that you're raising it in that way seems to suggest that there is, and, that's what I think Director
Yes, I
Weisberg
raise
is-
it as a concern. I do.
Well,
Thank you.
she's saying you're coming to a conclusion that that's a problem.
Nope, I raised it as a concern.
And she's
a
just saying to
concern.
be careful. Yes, that's.
Raise it as a concern. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else have any comments or questions before we vote?
Well, I guess, all right, so before we vote, yeah, I guess first I want to figure out, do we want to have, and I guess I can I can propose an amendment to the motion. But I wanted to discuss this first, about, do we obtain greater clarity on this and then ask for feedback from the candidates in terms of what is their cost and what is their timeline? Because if we say, what we want is 2 months, that may not be workable. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's perfectly workable. I believe that, and I wanted to get the feedback here because I feel like the motion, in my opinion, should be modified so that it does include kind of the basic levels that we for sure want to have investigated, the entities, and potentially that we would drop off out of the motion the name of the firm that's doing it.
And why is that?
The reason is that then we would have an authorization for an investigation, and we would then go to the candidates that we have identified and say, come to us with a proposal of, based on this, we're going to go forward with it. Tell us now what the anticipated, the estimated costs and timelines are, and then we can have a discussion about that.
Is there a reason that you don't want to take the advice of our legal counsel?
Well, I don't think this is the advice of our legal counsel.
It was the recommendation from our legal counsel.
This person, the Pamela Harris and the audit firm KDV Bergen was a recommendation. My understanding is that our legal counsel also recommended another law firm that said no, because there's a potential conflict of interest there in terms of not necessarily a legal conflict of interest, but just a perception of bias. And if you aren't aware of this, I did share it with Board Chair Stivlin, but that Pamela Harris is a former colleague of Maggie when they were together at Ryder Bennett. And I feel like I'm sure that Pamela Harris is, she's fully capable of performing a well-run investigation. However, if we are trying to authorize an investigation that is going to be viewed by the public without any degree of bias, or as little as possible, to have a report that the community can read as though it is the truth without any level of bias, I do have a concern with the relationship between Pamela Harris and our current legal counsel, when our current legal counsel must be one of the subjects of the investigation, just like I mentioned, some of these others. And so I feel like that is a consideration. That's one concern that I have. I think that all of us should have that concern, that there's the potential of perception of a bias.
Director Potacek?
Yeah, a couple questions I have, Mark, on that. Number one is that when we talk about the potential conflict, and we're talking about Maggie as being part of that, I don't remember that name coming up. I remember another name of somebody who was in the same firm, but not Maggie particularly. The other question I have is this. I'm not sure when you say, okay, they had a prior relationship, what does that mean and what's involved in that? And is that normal kind of reasons for disqualifying someone?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to it. I just know that it does exist, that they were partners together at a law firm for several years.
And is that recent? Is that 20 years ago?
Yeah, it was some time ago. It was my understanding it was in the 2000s, the early 2000s. But I would assume.
Which would be 20 years ago.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
Well, we
15 to
hired
20.
Peter Michael last summer, and he used to be a colleague of our legal counsel as well.
That's right,
So
but.
it's not typically.
not part of an
But Peter Michael's not investigating the firm. He's not investigating.
But go ahead,
It's still
continue if
hiring
you
an
would on
attorney.
the relationship part and what bothers you.
Yeah,
I'm
so
interested.
I feel like if all things being equal, why would we not choose a candidate who does not have that bias?
You're just making an
bias?
assumption that there is a bias, and I don't agree with that.
There may not be a bias, but there would be at least a perception of bias because there is their former relationship.
It
That's all.
happens all the time.
And again, I don't want to have to say our investigation needs to check all these boxes, because I'm afraid, like Director Riley said earlier, it would limit our investigation instead of letting it go where it needs to go. And I don't want to postpone when we need to get answers. It's been a long time of questions. We need answers.
But we also need to do it right.
Yes, we do.
And
Yes,
so
we
that's.
Which is why we have an attorney giving us advice.
And I just want to repeat that there's absolutely nothing saying you cannot create the list of boxes that you would like to see. As soon as we make this motion and approve it, you can begin creating that, crafting what your vision for the scope of it should be, and give that to the person. And let that be the beginning of the process.
But I want that directive to be coming from the board.
We can all do that.
Well, in our approval.
You have something you want to have specific in here now?
Well, basically what I ticked off,
Yeah.
those entities, I mean, at a minimum, what I'm looking for is to make sure that in any investigation, that each of these, if we'll call them an entity or a body.
You mean the list you started out with?
Yes.
That's absolutely the definition of the motion.
Good, then, no.
The bus garage project includes everything you listed.
Well, then, I just want to make sure that that's clear.
I think that's clear. Does everybody else think that's clear? An investigation involves interviewing and discovering any documents or recorded history or whatever, talking to all the appropriate people that have been involved in the project.
Then and if that's true, then I think can we agree here that.
No.
No. Keep
I
going.
am, not- I do,
Can-
I
can
am
we
not
agree-
interested in making it so defined that it can't go beyond that scope.
And I'm not either. I'm not either. What I'm trying to do is say that at least this investigation of the bus garage project investigates administration, previous school boards, current school board, district legal counsel, Kennedy and Graven, and district real estate agent. And to whatever extent we can, the land developer, seller, and the city of Lake Elmo. I want that to be a minimum.
I
That
think the
all of
last two
those
will
are.
definitely be, not to what extent. That's absolutely part of getting the picture. We need to talk to all of those entities.
Well, they may not agree to our interview, but.
Well, I suppose
Yeah.
that could be true for all of them, I guess.
But what I'd like, I mean, Board Chair Stivlin, would you agree that each one of those entities, if we'll call them an entity, would be subject to this investigation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, I agree, 100%. And you've said them twice, and it's on the record, so we will make sure that those are covered in the investigation. Director Pearson?
Thank you. So Director Burns, regarding the attorney, can you just go through maybe where, because you provided us some options, where did you get them, the recommendation for them? And
So-
then, you just recommended attorneys, right? Not an auditor, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. And another one of my questions is, do we need to approve an auditor at this time? I'd maybe like to hear some feedback on that. But to answer your question, Director Pearson, I have provided two alternatives. Candidates, one is the law firm of Lohman Abdo. They're a firm based in Minneapolis, but they have other offices, including one in Hudson, Wisconsin. And they do work in compliance. The attorney that I identified does work with compliance, and there's also a professional responsibility component to it. That one was simply me doing searching for attorneys who have a background. The other attorney, who, by the way, comes very highly regarded, is Attorney Michelle Soldo. And I got, this was, and I think I sent out an email to the board that unfortunately, what's her name, Joan, there was one who I identified, but unfortunately,
Joan Quaid.
Joan Quaid, thank you very much. She has been identified as a high risk for COVID-19, so she withdrew her name. But in doing so, she recommended this Michelle Soldo. And I hope that you've had an opportunity to review her materials. She doesn't advertise her services. She only does work on recommendation, word of mouth. And again, I don't, there's no reason why Pamela Harris, I'm sure, is an extremely competent, talented attorney who can do fantastic work. I have no reason to doubt that. The only reason why I'm hesitant to approve Pamela Harris is because of that relationship. What I just don't want the perception that there was some type of a bias. And in the cover letter that Michelle Soldo wrote here to you, Chair Stivland, she made it a point to indicate that she does not believe to have any relationships or associations that could create a perception of conflict. Her curriculum vitae speaks extremely highly of, she's done hundreds of these types of investigations.
Director Potacek?
Yeah, the question I had, because I did go through all of those resumes that they had there. The firm that's out of Minneapolis and out of Hudson, is that different? You hire the whole firm? Because there were two that were mentioned there. I think one had been a past board chair and vice chair, school board chair and vice chair, among other things. I also noticed, and that's where it's a little bit harder to compare to even cost. I think they quoted a cost of $324 per hour or something like that, and then there were other costs beyond that. So, I mean, I suspect, I don't know that, but I expect the cost range is gonna vary a great deal.
Yeah, and it's possible, I think, when I was contacted back, they asked, well, what are the parameters of because they could potentially give us a more detailed cost estimate. So at this point, it's just an hourly wage. We don't, as far as I know, we don't have that information about Pamela Harris. So we do have an hourly rate for Michelle Soldo. She offered a rate of, apparently a discounted municipal rate of $155 an hour.
And that's quite a range.
It is.
Yeah,
It is, but we don't have any information. That's why,
sure.
For Pamela, we don't have that information.
Yeah. The other thing that I think, and we ought to consider that too, I would like an investigation personally that goes very deep, but doesn't last a real long time, without knowing that's the reason we're choosing somebody to investigate, is they don't know. But I wonder if it might not be a good idea from the beginning to set a parameter. And then if it develops that you gotta go beyond, okay, we talk about it, but going in, it'd be nice to set a beginning and ending date.
Right, yeah. And just so I have no prior personal or professional relationship with any of these people listed whatsoever.
Just to clarify, in talking with our district legal counsel, who recommended these two people, the auditor looks at the numbers part of the picture, and the lawyer looks at the conversation and the facts and the information, the data and the interviews. So that's why there's two people there. They would work independently, but produce the picture collectively of what we're looking at. The estimate, I asked how long did she think it would take, and it's hard, she said it's hard to say because the scope can change and depending on how things go, but 6 to 8 weeks is what she suspected we should probably expect. And I do want to apologize, I had intended to find out what the hourly rate was for both of these companies, and I forgot to do that. So I know they work with a lot of schools, so I'm thinking they're relatively, reasonable price. Yes?
I guess I thought this board really took certain things seriously, like trying to avoid conflict of interest and in any capacity possible. So no offense to this Pamela, but if you have another one and we have a dollar amount, I guess I'm confused as to why the doubling down on someone and we don't even know how much she is. So I'm exceptionally confused. And how much we don't even have a dollar amount that are we asking to spend here? I'm perplexed. Are we just gonna vote on an open-ended dollar amount? Is that what you're proposing?
I think that's what we're talking about, whether we should or shouldn't.
In the middle of a pandemic, an open-ended dollar amount, when we don't even have the price of this person, and we have no idea how much she is. We already had one drop out because of the COVID. I see so many questions, I'm just not comfortable in any way, shape, or form with this at this juncture.
That's a fair point. I just would like to reiterate, there is no, I do not see personally a conflict of interest in having a person who was recommended by our lawyer.
Our
Just like
lawyer
you
is
went-
involved in it.
Just like Director Burns, why you went and looked for lawyers. That is exactly what our legal counsel did. They went and found a person that would be appropriate.
Our counsel is finding someone and they are gonna be part of it.
They're not
There's a
part-
big difference there.
You're making
And
a huge assumption
We,
that
well,
our
I,
legal
we're
counsel-
also assuming a random price tag that we want to vote on. So there's a lot of assumptions going around. That's for certain. That is something we can all agree on that, for sure.
Can I make I'd like to make a motion to amend the outstanding motion. And that would be that I'd like to make a motion to authorize an investigation of the bus garage project to include the entities discussed at this table. And then to select the service provider at a later meeting.
Do we have a second for the
I'll
amendment?
second that.
Do we need more discussion, or can we vote on that?
Further
Can I ask a
discussion?
question?
Yeah, a
Director
comment.
Pelletier?
I'm sorry.
Thanks, thank you. Are you, is that part of that motion, are you, my hope is that you're gonna say you want to include an actual dollar amount and what, more information as to, the dollar amount that is being requested of us to vote on?
Yeah, the expectation with it, because if we're not going to approve this outright tonight, we're not going to, the expectation would be that we would take this information and we would, I guess, direct Board Chair Stivland, but to obtain then specific proposals from each one of these candidates. That would include cost estimates and timeframe.
Director Pearson?
But really don't know how long it will take or how much it will cost, because we don't know what they're going to find when they get in there, right?
All we're gonna get is an hourly rate for these places. We're not gonna know what the total amount is gonna be. Unless we set a maximum and then we say, do whatever, I don't even think that is done. I think you're gonna get an hourly rate for these people is what you're gonna get.
And we didn't ask for that when we hired Peter to represent us for legal things that we didn't even know what they were at the time. We didn't ask for that.
No, yeah, that's
True.
that is true. That is true. And I'm just, I guess I would,
And we didn't ask for other choices at that time either. We were recommended somebody, and we hired that person.
that's true.
Yep.
I guess, given the opportunity to have those choices and have that information, I'm saying that it would be better.
Yeah, although, if you pursue that, because many of us knew Peter from prior experience, but at the same time, you could argue that Maggie, that was another recommendation she gave us, and we followed that, so. A question I have here, though, is that what I have before me is three possibilities. And Pamela is one of those, Soldo is one of those, and then the firm is one of those. What strikes me, I'm impressed by the firm, but $3.24 an hour is a huge difference between Soldo and that one. I'm also concerned, I don't think it would take that much to find out if Pamela was close or not to that cost. And I'm saying the lower cost.
Thank you. I think first to state, whatever we decide, I'd like us to be able to launch after tonight. So I'm not in favor of waiting till the next meeting, but Director Burns, can you tell me as an attorney, is it an expectation that you cannot have bias in the work that you do?
No, thank you for the question. I don't question that Pamela Harris would not do a good job or an unbiased review. I have no reason to believe that. My concern lies with the public perception. Would there be questions raised by the public knowing that there is this prior relationship? So no, there's no reason to question the ability for Pamela Harris to do a fine job for us. It's only the perception that I'm concerned about.
Any other questions or comments?
Director, did you say someone is hourly?
These are all hourly rates.
But if you know that, how did you not get the rate?
I'm not sure your question.
I think I may have gotten it a long time ago, and
Well,
I just
why
forgot.
wouldn't we have that provided to us?
We didn't have it for Peter.
I agree with that, and to be honest, you look at things in hindsight, how things might, how can we do better?
think
I
we did
totally agree
have-
with that,
I think you-
actually. You know,
You may have
I don't know
gotten it.
what to tell you. Now we have an opportunity to do a better job, so
some reason
because
I
we
have a
didn't do a
feeling
good job
it's-
last time, we're not, I don't know what you
I
do
think
with
you
that.
did have you had a kind of cover sheet and information on Peter, Michael, when you made that choice. And then also for Kennedy and Graven, when you chose them, those
Okay.
hourly fees
Okay.
are known.
So do we need to vote on the amended and then vote on the original?
Okay, so we have a motion, or we have an amendment to the motion to authorize an investigation of the bus garage project, but to include the entities that were discussed at the table and to determine which one to use at a future date. So I think we've had enough discussion of that. Can we have a vote on the amendment to the main motion? All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your right hand and say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so the amendment fails. Is there any more question or concern about the main motion to authorize an investigation of the bus garage project and to retain Attorney Pamela Harris and audit firm KDV Bergen for this purpose? Director Potacek.
Yeah, again, let me throw this out for thought. What I'm sensing here tonight is the majority of the people sitting here don't want to wait till April 9th to
Yeah.
meet again. I've got two resumes in front of me. One's missing the cost, the charge. I don't know if they'll be similar. I hope they do, but that may not be worth anything. Is there any possibility that what we could do is this? Normally, when you're picking out somebody, you send it first to a working group. In this case, it might be, the appropriate group is a finance group. That seems to me where the bus garage issue comes. Could we possibly do this? Invite these two individuals to come in, and the final selection, after they hear a presentation from Pamela and Soldo, that committee make a choice.
Director Weisberg?
I just think that would make it, that's the delay. I mean, I feel like the last motion would have passed if people were okay with the delay. I'm perfectly comfortable with the person that our attorney that we pay for her advice recommended. We didn't ask for this when we were recommended Peter, and he investigated things for us also. So I don't feel it's necessary now, and I'm perfectly happy with the person that our legal counsel recommended.
I agree, and I can say, if we were to vote on this and it were to be approved tonight, I could find out exactly what the cost is tomorrow and let everybody know tomorrow. And if there are serious concerns, anybody can tell me, we'll put it on the agenda for next time and we can go back and look at it again. Perhaps that would work. Director Pelletier?
Thanks. I just want to say, so we are voting on something to which we don't have a price tag attached by a recommended investigator that our attorney recommended, who will also be part of the investigation. I state my grave concerns. I'm done. I will absolutely not
This
be
is not an
supporting this.
investigation of our legal counsel. This is an investigation of the bus garage project.
If you don't understand the optics, I can't say any more to it.
That's fine.
I got nothing.
I'm just wanting to be clear.
Oh,
Director
it's
Pearson?
clear as mud.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I think when we do get legal, we don't often know the price. We didn't get that when we got Peter, and I agree that doesn't mean that that's what we should always do, but I think it is a little bit more difficult when you're getting legal counsel. You don't know how long it will take. I am not as concerned about who. I think they'll all do a fine job. I just want to get this passed and off the table.
If
Dr.
I can
Burns?
make my last pitch, again, if all things being equal, and I'll say it that I feel that I haven't had an opportunity to speak with Pamela Harris, but Michelle Soldo comes highly recommended. She has extremely impressive background and curriculum vitae. Her billing rate appears to be very reasonable. I recommend that we choose Michelle Soldo so that we have no concern whatsoever about any kind of implicit bias or anything, and that there's no perception of bias. Why would we voluntarily take that on when we have a candidate who does not have that, who is free of that?
Is that an amendment?
Don't
Director Riley?
attorneys have to follow ethical standards?
And again, there's no legal, as far as I can tell, there's no legal conflict of interest. The issue is, would the public have a concern that the attorney performing the investigation, because of her, I'll be quick if you're concerned, but the concern is here that the attorney that we'd be hiring, Pamela Harris, had a multi-year professional relationship with Maggie. And Maggie is part of the firm that we just agreed upon is going to be one of the subjects of our investigation. And it strikes me that why would we voluntarily enter into that when people could say, no, wait a minute, was that really a fair investigation when they're clearly have a relationship together? We have alternatives that aren't.
Can I just explain?
How do
You
we
know
know
what?
that we don't have none?
Our district legal counsel did not have a role in this bus garage project.
We just agreed that they did.
No, you're talking about our district legal counsel having a relationship with this person.
Kennedy and Graven.
Our legal counsel is not, you're talking about
Individuals within the
individuals
firm.
within that company that may have a concern or a situation related to, but not our district legal counsel is one person who had nothing to do with it.
But it's a firm, and they're all part of the same, for
Okay,
professional responsibility, they are.
You know what?
The rules of
Okay.
professional responsibility.
With all due respect, I think we do hear what you're saying. We do understand that you have a concern about this person. I hear what you're saying. I think that we can trust that these people are gonna do a job that is trustworthy and honest, and we need to get going on with this, so.
Could I make an amendment, Chair? For the sake of going for a 7-0 vote and trying to find some consensus, I would like to amend the motion and, given we have a price tag here, retain Michelle Soldo as the investigator.
I'll second that.
We have an amendment to, instead of hiring Pamela Harris, to hire Michelle Soldo instead. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, it would seem to me that if Pamela Harris was asked, would you be fair and unbiased in this situation? Ask her the question. Most lawyers who anticipate that will do what? If they see a conflict, they'll tell you.
Was Pamela Harris advised that one of the subjects of our investigation will be Kennedy and Graven?
Yeah, the firm, possibly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
Clearly.
the point is, if she says yes, then you got a possible potential fallback.
So we can.
Any other
vote.
questions about the amendment? All in favor of amending the main motion to replace Pamela Harris with Michelle Soldo, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Nay. The amendment fails. All right, let's get to the motion. We have a motion to authorize an investigation of the bus garage project and to retain Pamela Harris and audit firm KDV Bergen for this purpose. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Thank you. The motion passes. All right, we are on to And before we move on to this, I would just like to take a quick note to Sherry. At the end of this meeting, we're adjourning to a closed session. I don't have the language for that motion. I printed mine off before that came. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so item F is a motion to direct the superintendent to place the individual identified as employee A on paid administrative leave effective March 30th, 2020. Thank you. I would like to amend this motion as it's printed in the packet to include the words that this does not preclude employee A from performing tasks related to the COVID-19 response work.
I think you need a
Wait,
second.
Chair, could I ask a question of that?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't even know if that's legal. Is it, we're putting someone on leave, but we're expecting them to do part of their job?
If a person is on leave, they still are able to do work of a critical nature if it's needed. They're still employed, they're perfectly capable, it's just that they're on paid administrative leave. So if something is needed, I think it would be appropriate to be able to resource this person if that it comes to be required.
Did you ask legal counsel about this?
Yes. But if we don't want to have that amendment on there, then I don't have to make that the main amendment. I can make the motion just as it's written. The motion to direct the superintendent to place the individual identified as employee A on paid administrative leave effective March 30th, 2020.
I will second the amendment,
The motion or the amendment?
the amendment.
COVID.
Okay, so all right, so I'm just gonna repeat this. The main motion then is to direct the superintendent to place the individual identified as employee A on paid administrative leave effective March 30th, period. This does not preclude employee A from performing tasks related to the COVID-19 response work as needed.
Okay, so is that part of the main motion, or is that a separate amendment?
I'm gonna say that that's the main motion,
So
because that's
we'll
how I'm
withdraw
saying it
mine.
right now. It's not how it's written in the packet.
Okay.
Superintendent, you
I
have.
need to make a comment just to clarify some things for the board. This position is significant for the district, especially during this time. I cannot imagine right now how I'm going to, COVID-19 response is everything we're doing right now. And the district, if this goes forward, the district will need to hire an interim position to take care of the responsibilities for this position. And availability of interim people to do this kind of work is very limited. We've shared that with Director Stivland. I have a real concern that doing this will really limit our ability to have our district functioning in the best ability for our students, especially during this time. I have a grave concern about the amendment because I just don't know how we're going to do it. That is a full-time job right now. So I just share that with the board.
Okay, Director Weisberg?
And it was my understanding that people have been in touch with possible temporary agencies. I'm not sure what it is that handles it, but that has happened or can happen
It's
soon.
ongoing.
Yep.
I think Director Moen.
That's what I understand.
Well, I think also we had a conversation, and I don't know, Director
Moen.
Moen?
I guess she's trying to get on her. That is true, it's an ongoing process. It has not been a successful process.
Yes, I can give an update on that. I have been trying to take some steps to do that at this point with the COVID virus. I'm getting a lot of rejections because people are wanting to be home with their families, so that is still very much in process.
Okay,
Which is why the March 30th date is there, right?
That's
To give
right.
some time.
Director Burns?
Can I first ask about what is meant in the amendment by related to COVID-19? How would that be defined?
I just am trying to acknowledge the fact that this is a critical time. We've extended the effective date to March 30th instead of immediately. And, you know, in talking with legal counsel, it is completely appropriate to have someone who's on paid administrative leave provide assistance as needed if it's critical. And that's completely appropriate. So I wanted to allay some of the concerns that people had shared that this was going to cause a problem for the district, that it, you know, I was trying to respond to that.
I think there's a question.
Can I just make it quick? Because I'm working with every department, right now, there is no such thing as COVID versus non-COVID operations. So by the amendment, what you're saying is continue as is, for the most part right now. Just want to put that out there.
Okay. Then I could amend this and take that part off.
I just wanted you to be informed.
I guess it doesn't really matter.
I think the point.
It just
that
says it
was-
doesn't preclude us from being able to ask this person to assist. It doesn't mean we're required to do that.
I think the point to be made was just that this person would be paid still, just not present. And if there is a need, the district is allowed to utilize them in the need.
Which is how paid administrative leave works.
That is how I understand it. Well, Director Burns?
Did you have a follow-up to that? Because I have a different question.
Go ahead.
I guess my question is just broadly, why? Why are we taking
That was
this
actually my
action?
question. Why is,
I think that trying to answer that question would be too revealing of,
It would implicate or.
we're talking about employee A.
And that's why I brought up what I did at the beginning of the meeting, is because this is the first time that we've had any kind of discussion about this. This is the first time we've had a meeting as a board.
About the bus terminal?
No, about this action item.
Okay.
Well, you were given some background information to refer to prepare for tonight. And if you had questions or concerns about it, you could have brought those forward at any time in the past month.
But the documentation that's referred to in the action item was brief.
Yes.
And I don't think that any of the materials that we have reviewed would really answer that question. Why are we taking this action?
I think we're trying to do whatever we can to get to the truth.
But how does this get to the truth?
Which,
It's really not appropriate to talk about that.
well,
right now.
we haven't had a conversation, so what truth? Can you elaborate on that? What truth? About what?
About how we got here.
I think.
How we got where?
I think we can't have the conversation, well, and we haven't had the conversation because we can't have the conversation.
Well, we could follow statute and have a closed session, so we didn't do that, right?
As we said
We've
earlier,
had
there
some
is no
closed
complaint.
sessions.
We had some closed sessions on what?
Complaint.
Liz,
There is
Liz.
no complaint.
So why the need to do this now in the middle of a pandemic? Please answer the question. Why do this now in the middle of a pandemic?
I am not able to answer that question right now.
And yet you're gonna make this move right now,
I
in
made
this
a
moment in
motion.
time.
I made a motion. If you want to vote against it, you may. Does anybody else have questions or comments? Director Burns?
Do we have any idea how long this leave would last? It's a multi-part question. What costs it may incur to the district? And what would be the conditions for reinstatement?
There would, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there are any at this point. That may come out later, perhaps. I'm not able to answer that the second question. I'm not actually able to answer the first question either. We don't know how long it'll be.
Who's the we?
Anybody.
We, the board.
If the board gets a majority vote.
If this passes, I can't guarantee any timeline or cost or conditions of, you know, ending the employment administrative leave. I don't have those answers for you.
This affects the health, welfare, and safety of our students and our families.
Should we vote?
I have a noun to read. The definition of a witch hunt is a situation where accusations are made freely, especially against someone or something that is not popular with the majority.
There's no accusation.
There's no accusation.
Why are we putting someone on leave then
We're
during a
doing an-
pandemic?
We're doing an investigation.
On what? On
I
what?
went,
No, that's enough.
On what?
That's.
We haven't had a closed session. I want to know what.
Director Pelletier, you've asked the question a number of times.
And you can't
You've
answer,
been-
can you?
Yeah, that is exactly correct. We cannot answer. And I've said that multiple times. So stop asking the question that cannot be answered
I
right
will
now.
ask till 10 o'clock at night if I have to.
Well,
Hey.
I guess I would prefer if you didn't. Director Pearson.
thank you. So going back to the statute says that you shall close for preliminary consideration of allegations or charges. There is no preliminary consideration of allegations or charges in this case.
Then why are we doing it?
Once again, we cannot answer that question at this
Oh,
time.
my goodness gracious.
That's why we're given the background information to review and plenty of opportunities to talk about it ahead of time.
Let's just vote.
Grave
any
concerns
other
about being
questions?
sued. Grave concerns about a lawsuit.
Duly noted. Any other questions?
I want no part of this.
You will have a right to vote. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
I don't know, did you get a second?
Yep, Mike seconded.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So at this point, the motion reads that this is a motion to direct the superintendent to place the individual identified as employee A on paid administrative leave effective March 30th, 2020. This does not preclude employee A from performing tasks related to the COVID-19 response work as needed. That is the motion. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. I am making a motion to move into closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03B. The governing body of a public employer may, by a majority vote in a public meeting, decide to hold a closed meeting to consider strategy for labor negotiations, including negotiation strategies or developments or discussion and review of labor negotiation proposals. Conducted pursuant to sections 179A.01 to 179A.0.25. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Director Weisberg is the second. All in favor of moving to a closed session, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you. We are now closed.